Welcome back to RGR Football, everybody. My name is Daniel Harms. You can find me on Twitter at InHarmsWay19, the lead film analyst there. And today I have a very special show for you guys. Matt Bowen of ESPN NFL writer and analyst is joining me today. I'm very excited about this. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great. What's going on?
Let's go ahead and shift now to the defensive line, defensive end area, because this is where those premium positions are. Getting after the pass rusher now is the name of the game. Interior becoming even more important now than it has been the last couple of years. So do you see multiple difference maker type defensive ends in this class? Like, how much do you think there's a couple of guys that could just really break open an offensive line? And do you think there's how much risk involved with some of these players?
Let's put it this way. I don't see a Von Miller in this class. Okay. I don't see that that elite player coming out on the edge. But you don't have to have elite traits to be a difference maker in the NFL. You have to have some traits. We understand that you have to have closing speed. You have to have some ability to bend on the edge. You don't want an extremely tight hit player on the edge trying to rush in the National Football League. You want to see advanced hand usage at this stage. Okay, again, that's a coachable trait, but you want to see some sense of a toolbox of moves coming in. Too often in the NFL, I think, with projecting is we see players at the college level that are so advanced in terms of physical tools versus their competition that they can use a long arm. They can use a bull rush consistently and win. And that wins in college football. I get it. But when you get to the National Football League, you have to have more. And again, you can teach this stuff, but in terms of true difference makers, I think it starts at this top. I think Will Anderson is one to start and discuss right away. I know Will Anderson did not have the same production he had 2 years ago, but we've seen him have high-level production against the best competition in the country in the SEC conference. There is some lower body tightness to Will Anderson. Again, he's not as fluid as Von Miller, but he can bend. I think his short area burst or short area closing speed is elite. I do think that's elite. I think he's a very smart and aware football player. I think he's a very physical football player and someone that's going to be a very productive pro. And that's going to be reflected in where you see him drafted. I would be very surprised if he is not drafted in the top 5. And we understand that quarterbacks run the draft. We know that. And we don't know how that's exactly going to play out. We know with number 1, Carolina trading up to get a quarterback. But after that, could Will Anderson go number 2 to Houston? Why not? Right? Why not? Good. You look at DeMeco Ryans and what he needs. And I would love to see Will Anderson in that defense because they use so many. I use the term scheme fronts, Daniel. So they use the loaded fronts. They will walk a linebacker up. And what they're trying to do with all this is create one-on-ones, right? That's what scheme fronts are. You're trying to create one-on-ones and the matchup you want. And we've seen it in San Francisco with Bosa and how they scheme him with Fred Warner walked up, the twists and stunts they use to get guys free. Will Anderson would be outstanding in that type of front. So there is a possibility that he is the first defensive player drafted, and it could come as early as number 2.
I think what gets forgotten in the Will Anderson discourse that we've seen on Twitter is that he played 4-eye almost exclusively this year. And you go back to 2021, he was playing off the edge on the outside of the defense. And as a guy who's, undersized in terms of what he is. He is that more of a speed at rusher off the edge. He's not this 260, 70-pound athlete who's just going to bull rush. He's playing there against guys that are bigger than him and who have leverage advantages. You brought up the point of technique, being able to just kind of long arm and get away with being more powerful. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show last week with Mitchell Schwartz and Marshall Newhouse, excuse me. And they were talking specifically about technique because you get away with so much stuff at college when you're just bigger and faster than some of the guys you're playing against. And then you get to the NFL and it's all about that technique. The tackles, they're going to lift you up when you're long arm. They're trying to stop your momentum going forward as a bull rusher. So they're just going to lift you up. So if, for example, Isiah Foskey, very big long arm guy. He is 100%. I'm going to get my arm into your chest. You continuously do that. If you go watch him against Matthew Bergeron was like, fine, I'll just lift you up. You're going to be able to continuously get inside of me because you can't stress the arc. Like you can't beat me around the edge. So you have to go through me. Fine. You can't go through me because technique matters.
A player like that is Lukas Van Ness from Iowa.
Yeah.
Look, and like I said, I love the Hawks and what Coach Ferentz and everyone on that staff in Iowa, but Lukas Van Ness needs to develop a deeper toolbox of rush moves, because right now Lukas is bull rush long arm, right?
Yeah.
Because he is an explosive athlete. He does have incredible length at the point of attack to use that long arm technique and to keep blockers off him. But in the National Football League, you're going to start with that. What's your counter when they take it away? Because they're going to take it away. They're going to take it away from you. So you have to have another counter and a deeper toolbox of moves to create a rush path and to create conflict for your opponent. Okay, because that's what it's about. You look at Nick Bosa and how many different moves he has, right? It's the same with speed rushers.
Yeah.
And it starts at our level. I've coached speed rushers that I see that can run around the tackles all day.
Mm-hmm.
When they get to college, you can't run around tackles all the time. In the pros, you definitely cannot run around tackles all the time. So what is your setup to get to that point, Daniel, when you can dip and bend on the edge and flatten that rush path? You have to have a setup to get there. And that, again, is part of the developmental process. It's a part of seeing things and seeing how fast the game and seeing how technically based this game really is, especially at the premium position. But Van Ness is one of those players who, look, I think Lukas is a top 20 pick. I do. Based on the physical profile, the physical tools, and the traits he has, and the projection you have on Lukas as a pro football player. But there's going to be an adjustment period for him. Derick Hall from Auburn, I really like his tape. I like Derick Hall, but he's a power rusher, right? He's going to have a deeper toolbox there to have some change-ups for those offensive tackles in the NFL. But what he does now, I'm telling you, when you watch him use a long arm sometimes, he will walk people back. That's how powerful he is in the upper body. He will walk people back. And I think that happens a lot with young pass rushers is it takes time to understand just how prepared you have to be. But again, that comes with more game reps. It comes with more experience. But what I can't teach is the length that Van Ness has, right? I can't teach that stuff. So again, it goes back to traits. We know, like we've said throughout this show, the draft is about traits. Tyree Wilson's another player. I think Tyree Wilson is a top 10 pick. Okay. Again, just like Will Anderson has some tightness in his lower body. But in terms of straight line power and the versatility he brings, I think he can play as a wide technique. I think he can play as a 5. I think there's a lot of different things you can do with him. And his physical profile is something you really want in the defensive front.
Yeah, I like that you brought all those guys up, specifically Derick Hall and Lukas Van Ness. I imagine you expect him. He's going to play defensive end in the NFL. He played a ton, actually almost exclusively, as that interior pass rusher for Iowa coming out this year, really on those third downs, trying to really just disrupt things. And both of these guys, I think all three of them, honestly, can stress the arc. What I mean by that is get to your spot that you have, this landmark you have before the tackle does. I think all of them can do that with that acceleration, that short area quickness forward. The consistency with Tyree Wilson is not there, and that's one thing that I really stressed about. I stressed about his tape is that he is very lazy off the ball. He is. He's always the last guy off the ball, but you see the ability at times to do all of that. He can stress, he can bend, he can get around. I think the first time I watched him, I didn't notice a ton of the athletic ability. Then I kept going and I'm like, okay, he does have some bend to him. He's not the bendiest guy in the world, but it's hard to be bendy at 6'7" He's huge. It's hard to be bendy at that age, at that frame. But all three of those guys, you talked about counters. That's what it is. And what I loved about seeing Derick Hall at the Senior Bowl is he talked specifically being self-aware that I need to be able to get some inside counters to work on some of those things. When you have that power to walk tackles back, you have to be able to now attack the inside. So they have to think about, okay, so he can beat me across my face. How do I stop that? And then that's where those counters come in. So those, again, the three guys that we talked about, Isiah, Foskey, Nolan Smith is going to be a guy that's probably going top 20. I think he's going to be a top 20 something pick. Hassan Reddick really helped pave the way for him this past couple of years. And you watch his tape, he is so powerful. He plays bigger, like 260 pounds. He plays like he's 260 pounds when he sets the edge. He has that, like you were talking about with the corners and safeties, he has that effort level. He's always hot around the edge. So these are guys that could go in the first round. Now, I don't think Derick Hall will, even though I think he could sneak in depending on how teams feel about and where the runs go. But talk to me a little bit about somebody who's not getting enough attention on day 2 that you think is going to have that does have some of these traits that can really impact the defense, that is going to help somebody early on in their career?
I think there's two, and one might be a first rounder, but Will McDonald out of Iowa State. And we talk about
Okay.
the ability to bend and having loose ankles.
Yep.
And again, someone and who was utilized differently in college than they're going to be as a professional player. Because everyone knows if you watch Iowa State, they play that odd or 3-man front where he's not so much a wide 9 rusher. Where I think in the NFL he will be utilized as a true edge player to threaten. You said to threaten the arc. That's what Will McDonald can do.
Yes. Oh yeah.
There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt. And if you really study his tape in situations where he is utilized as an outside player that can win both inside and outside moves, I think he can do that. The other one is B.J. Ojulari from LSU. I was watching his tape this week. Has explosive straight line juice. Again, like most of the rushers in this class, is not super flexible in the lower body, but has enough flex to where he can turn the corner. That's a player I look at, and I know they play at the same colleges, but if you look at, again, how they're utilizing the pros, all right, can he be utilized or deployed like Arden Key was last year in Jacksonville, or how he was before in San Francisco, in terms of how he can be that edge rusher, and at times you can line him up as a stand-up 3 technique and twist him and stunt him inside. So those are 2 players right there who I think are probably day 2 picks. Okay, I could be wrong, Daniel, but I think are probably day 2 picks. Maybe McDonald sneaks in the back of round 1, but they have the traits to fit in today's pass rush fronts in the National Football League.
Yeah, both of those guys, they're going to be high impact off the edge. Well, they're going to have to work on their setting the edge, their run defense early. But when you draft these guys, you're thinking about developing that as they go, and they're going to be predominantly, I would imagine, 3rd down players early on. You don't necessarily want them starting immediately at that run area, be a part of a rotation. And a guy that I really like, that I think is going to go day 2, has been talked a little bit about day 1, which, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with to an extent, because he has a lot of upside, is Felix Anadike Uzama out of Kansas State. I did a feature on him for the RGR channel, and he's very toolsy player. He doesn't necessarily always know exactly what he wants to do, but you can see him set up a tackle for later in the day. In the pass rush, you see him work that outside, give him a couple different looks, and then stress, and then go right across his face. That's the kind of stuff that you can teach. It's a little harder to teach.
It is.
The instinctual pass rushing that he has. Also, I think the biggest issue with him is consistent technique. Run game, he still has he has the power to extend. He doesn't always do it. He lets tackles get inside his chest a little bit too much and move him around. But he does. He has the frame. He has the body type. I think he's got decent bend. He has some speed up the arc. Consistency with his game is really where it's going to come down to, and finding a way to get all of that out of him, because he could be a really exceptional 2 or possibly even 1 edge rusher for a team in the NFL in his career. I really liked what I saw out of him. But double teams, at the end of the day, you're not going to see a ton of doubles at the NFL level, tackles and tight ends maybe. But I loved all the different tools that he has at his disposal. And when you have somebody like that, especially on beginning early rounds of round 2, I think he's going to come off the board pretty quickly when day 2 rolls around.
I agree with you. And that's someone who has, already a pretty established toolbox of confidence, right? And again, the ability to play with your hands, right? Your hands are your weapons in the National Football League and any level of football. The ability to use your hands as a pass rusher are very important. He does. He's got a variety of moves. He has a plan. And those are things that you don't usually have coming into the NFL. I mean, again, we're talking about someone at a very high level. Both the Bosa brothers did when they came to the NFL in terms of their hand use technique. But that is a positive for him. I saw that on tape as well. That is a positive for him. And I do think, like you said, that could push him into the first round. And it could be in Kansas City.
It's all those traits. That's some place I've really thought about him. Like, it makes a lot of sense, especially when you compare George Karlaftis. I think they complement each other well. George, obviously, this past offseason now has been working with Tom Bahali. One of the things that I wrote up about him coming out, he used his hands a little bit better, and he's starting to do that. The strength is always there. So I'm excited about that possibility. We'll see what ends up happening there. Let's end this discussion with the defensive line. I know this isn't the sexiest thing to talk about, but this is where these guys and really can help the defensive ends. I think the interior pressure has become so much more important with forcing these really athletic, good pocket moving quarterbacks out to your edge rushers, because they can step up and get out. It's a little bit easier to make plays down the field. But if you can stop that from happening, guess what? You have a whole different things that are going to happen. So how do you feel about this defensive line class? We'll talk about guys not named Jalen Carter, because Jalen Carter is, we all kind of understand that he's thought of as one of the best defensive prospects to come out in a while. So how do you feel about it?
I think it's a good defensive line class. Again, what you're looking for isn't always there in terms of everyone wants that, 3 technique that can rush the passer, right? And obviously Carter is one of those guys. I think Yancey's one of those guys as well. I think you have a lot of guys can play inside that have disruptive ability, that can play as a 1 technique, potentially as a 3 technique, especially early down players. And you talk about Smith out of Michigan is one that jumps to my head right now, who has athletic traits. Now, one thing with Smith out of Michigan that I would like to see more of is more disruptive plays. Yes. And we were talking about defensive back with someone like Phillips out of Utah, and how many plays he made on tape. With Smith, you don't see him make a ton of disruptive plays or impact plays. Now, can you project that? Does he have the traits to be that guy in the NFL? Probably he does. Sure he does. Okay. But that's one thing I look at always with tape, and I've talked to people about how do you weigh this, right? If a guy doesn't make a bunch of plays at the college level against Power 5 competition, but he has the traits, then it becomes more of a projection. What you think you can do in your defensive system with your coaching, your defensive line coach, with the players around him on the defensive line, how are you going to utilize him? And look, does he have the ability to make those plays? If he has the ability, then you believe it. Then you buy into it, right? You believe into it. But that's one of the players that jumped out to me when watching tape was, look, I really like the traits. I really like what he can do in the interior defensive front. I just wanted to see him make more plays. Okay, I just really wanted to see him make more plays. But in terms of the physical profile and the traits, he has it 100%. And we can go down. You can go to Benton out of Wisconsin, and we watched at the Senior Bowl down there as well. A disruptive interior player who has, I think, some pass rush potential as well. But it's a good class. It's a good class. I think the edge class has more high-end talent, obviously. Yeah. This is a good class that you're going to see draftable prospects. And again, just like the secondary, but even more so in the defensive front, you're going to have rotation. The defensive linemen don't play 80 plays. They don't. And look at Philadelphia last year. Yeah. Look at the depth they had. You got to have that today, because you want to be able to throw waves at opposing quarterbacks, throw waves at them with guys that can come off the ball consistently. The way you do that is to have rotation.
I agree with that. And they had like 2 starting defensive lines back there in Philadelphia. They had 2 guys who did 2 separate defensive starting lines. It was ridiculous to watch them just throw waves at offensive lines. Would you liken Mazi Smith's situation to like Rashawn Gary coming out? Same school, the athletic traits. He didn't necessarily have the production at Michigan, but we're seeing him develop in Green Bay into one of, I would say, of the better pass rushers in the NFL. I agree. Kind of like a situation you're seeing with
and look, Rashawn Gary, it took him a couple of years, right? It took him a couple of years to understand the pro game, develop that pro technique we're talking about, to have those counter moves. But eventually the physical skills and the traits take over, right? And Rashawn Gary is one of the was their #1 recruit coming to high school as well. Okay, so that matters too, okay, because the traits don't change. You have those traits. And I think, Dan, I think you're on the right path, because, again, height, weight, and speed, the lateral movement, the lower body agility that Smith has, and the foot quickness should translate into making disruptive plays and to being able to get through blockers and at times live in the opponent's backfield.
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of these guys that flash upside, like Gervin Dexter, for example, out of Florida. Every game I watched, I'm like, okay, there's 2 plays where he just puts it all together and he's a terror. Right. And then there's a ton where he's just laid off the ball and the hand technique isn't there, but the upside. So that's the kind of the same. I would think it's to a lesser degree than Mazi Smith. Mazi was more consistent in his ability to anchor against the run and get off the ball and kind of show you I can swim around this center or I can power this guard. I think that Gervin Dexter has all the tools to be able to do that. Obviously, the physical acumen to be able to play. He's huge. He's long. He does have speed, downhill speed, acceleration. But that technical aspect is one of the areas that he's lacking and consistently getting off the ball. Who is one of these players that you're kind of lower on in terms of, you see a lot of, maybe didn't see a lot of talk, but someone who's kind of finding their way upwards in the draft process that you think might either take a little bit longer or doesn't have necessary tools to see what everyone else is seeing?
And I'll preface this with saying, look, all these guys are draftable, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm not coming down this player and saying, look, I
No.
don't like this player. I like all these players. I think you can coach all of them. But I think one player would probably be Roy out of LSU. Okay. I think Roy's name is coming up a little bit. And I think he doesn't have, when you're talking about Smith, the lower body foot quickness, lower body agility. I don't see the same with him. Okay. I think he is tighter in his lower body than Smith. And I think that will impact him at times in the NFL. But in terms of the effort level and how he plays and how he can be utilized as a 3 technique or 1, there's no question about it. He has the traits to be a solid pro and a quality starter in the National Football League. That's really what you're looking for. There's only so many blue chip players, right?
Yes.
There's so many real blue chip players in the NFL right now, right? So if you're looking at prospects and you're saying he's a top tier blue chip player, there's not as many as people really think. Okay. What you're looking for, in my opinion, Daniel, is quality starters. Someone that can have a long pro career, someone who's available, someone who's tough, someone who'll play through injury, someone that will play just as hard in week 2 as they do in week 14, right? So all these players that we're talking about right now, especially in the defensive front, I think can be quality starters in the NFL and a part of a defensive line rotation. I don't think there's Chris Jones here. Okay. And I think that's fair to say. There's not Chris Jones here. I don't see Aaron Donald here. But with Jalen Carter, you might. Okay. And you might. Okay. And I think a lot of people look at Jalen Carter that way in terms of, not saying similar traits to Donald and Jones. I'm saying having difference making traits.
Okay.
All right. And I think that's fair to say about Jalen Carter, that he can be a true difference maker in the National Football League. And I'm very interested to see where he goes. I don't see him getting out of the top 10.
Yeah. I don't either.
He's too talented, Daniel. If you're the Chicago Bears and you're Matt Eberflus and general manager Ryan Poles at number 9 and Jalen Carter's there, that has to be the pick, in my opinion. You need a 3 technique for your defense right now anyways. So you're also filling a need while drafting the best player on the board at the time. And all I can tell you is right now, the way I evaluate players, Daniel, is only based on tape. So I'm not getting into any other stuff when it comes to players. All I can tell you is what I see in the tape. What I see in the tape with Jalen Carter, when he's playing at his best, okay? He did not play at his best against Ohio State in the national semifinal. But when he's playing at his best, he is one of the best prospects in this class. Maybe the best, if you're looking at it that way. Might be the best for some people, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I try to stay away from the outside stuff too. I have no information about any of it. Like, that's not where it is. We try to just look at it. And one of the players that I guess I have more questions. Not that I'm lower on. I have more questions. I see all the tools and everything is Brian Bresee out of Clemson. And again, this is another situation where there were some off-field concerns. His sister having died from dying of cancer before his season this last year. Lots of things weigh on the mind, and I won't speak to his situation because I don't know. I don't have a clue. But I do know that a lot of people were projecting him to be a first-round pick before right now. And the tools, again, you see all of it there. He's got power. He has the motor. He plays athletically as a defensive tackle. I saw a lot of inconsistencies with his pad level getting kind of pushed around a little more than I would have liked to see. And for a guy who is, again, he's sub 300 pounds, he's about 298 pounds where he measured in at. He has the length, he has the 6'5.5" frame, he has all of that you're looking for as a penetrating, type of defensive tackle. He gets caught, he just kind of got pushed over. And I want to see some of that lower body anchor just to his game, because again, I see all of that. And the tackling technique is also, he falls off of tackles, falls off of sacks. That can really get into some of not just like your technical ability to succeed, but I think it kind of wears on your brain a little bit. Like, you're missing tackles and you're missing sacks, and I think that can get into you a little bit. But I have more questions about his, I guess, elevation where he could be in the NFL. But like you said, these guys are all going to be part of, I would think, valuable parts of rotations at the NFL level. If there is a spot for him, if you just want to say, go penetrate this B gap, A gap, whatever it is, just go do that. I'm down with all of that stuff. These guys are going to be impactful players in the draft. I just, I have a little more questions about him, but
that's fine. Look, you're looking at what the tape's telling you, and that's okay to be honest about what you see on film.
Yeah.
because that, like you just said, that's what you're studying. Is you're studying tape. So you have questions about tape. It's okay to have questions about tape, but that you bring up a good point about scheme fit. Okay, some of these defensive tackles belong in one gap scheme. That's just how it is. You don't want them taking on doubles all day. You want them penetrating, getting up the field, and creating disruption. That's what you want, both versus the run and the pass game. Where other players, hey, they can play as a 1 or 0 tech nose all day long and hold the point of attack and fight a double, keep your linebackers clean, and be in a position to get into the backfield and make some disruptive plays as well. So scheme fit does matter. And that's with all these players. Doesn't matter what position we're talking about. Scheme is very important. Coaching is very important. Opportunity is very important in the NFL. And overall, the situation is the most important thing. What situation you're put into. Are you ready to play early? If you're not, are you put on the field too early? Do you have veteran talent around you in the room, whether it's a defensive back room, a D-line room, quarterback room, that is going to guide you and help you? One of the biggest things I had, look, I wasn't a very good player. I was just a guy. But the biggest things I had as a rookie was being in the defensive back room with Todd Light and Devin Bush Sr. and Dexter McLeon and Keith Lyle and guys I extremely looked up to who helped me consistently with understanding the pro game, understanding simple things, what to wear in the plane. You don't know anything. You know where the bathroom is in the facility. You don't know how to get home after practice. Trust me, this was 2000, so not everyone. There was no iPhones. Okay, first of all, there was no navigation in cars. I can't tell you how many times the first week of once we got back from camp, I got lost going back to my apartment. I had no idea where it was, how to get there, right? So there's things you need to learn as a rookie, and that's why situation matters so much. And guys that help you in terms of understanding technique, again, how to watch tape. Watching tape in college is much different than watching tape in the pros, because now this is your job. In college, there's a time limitation of how much time you can have in the meeting room with your coaches, how much time you have in the practice field. In the NFL, none of that exists. When Joe Gibbs came back to Washington, those are the longest days I've ever experienced in terms of, being in the workplace that long, having special teams meeting at 7 and getting home sometimes at 6, 7 at night. All right, on Wednesday and Thursday. This is your job now. And for some young players, that's an adjustment as well. So having it be 24/7 football and understanding that, and I think college football is this now too, Daniel, but in the NFL is 100% the business of winning. And if you're not helping the team win, quite simply, you're going to be replaced. And look, I was replaced 3 times in that league. And I got hurt 3 times in that league because and that's why I was replaced. That's another thing. You have to be available. You have to be on the field. You have to be able to practice and produce in games. And if you're in the training room, it's not the place you want to be, right? So there's a lot of things that these young players are going to have to learn. But the number one thing for me is what I hope for all of them is they're put in a situation where they're comfortable in terms of the coaching and the scheme, that they utilize or deploy them in the right way so we can see those traits that we're talking about, right? That's what we want. I never want to see a young player, a rookie player fail. I don't want to see that. I want all these guys to play well. I want them all to get paid eventually. I do. I want them to play 7, 8, 9 years so they're vested players and have a pension and have all the benefits you get as a former National Football League player. I want them to be in a position to go win a championship. That's what everyone wants. But again, that's why I bring up situation. It does matter. We've seen it time. Obviously, we see it more with quarterbacks, Daniel. We understand that. But there are little things we don't see with defensive backs or put in the wrong situation, and they don't get to 8 years in the league because of it.
Yeah, I think that's exceptionally well said, because the average NFL career is 4 or 5 years, like it may be even shorter. So and I try to say this with every guy that I evaluate. If I'm lower on a player, I always want to be proven wrong if I'm lower on a player every single time. That's always what I want. I want to see these guys get the best out of them and be productive players in the NFL. So I'm never trying to just down somebody because I don't like them. No, I'm just trying to be honest to what I see and evaluate that way. And I always want to be wrong if someone is.
Yeah, and the best way to do it, Daniel, and I learned this from doing NFL matchup show with Greg Cosell, who I think the world of in terms of his ability to evaluate talent, is you always say it's based on the tape, right?
Yeah.
Based on what you see on tape. You're not bringing any other factors in. There's no personal feelings here. It's what you see on tape. You're watching game tape, you are studying it, and that's what you think, and you have an opinion on it. You're not always going to be right. I'm not always right. But you're not always going to be wrong either, right? You're not always going to be wrong either. Okay, so it takes time. And look, it takes time, like you said, you've been doing this in 2018. It takes time to understand how to do it too, right?
A
To
lot.
make some mistakes. Look, it's no different. I say this all the time with young players, whether it's look, I see it at our level when we bring up a sophomore to play in a varsity game. And I tell the head coach, look, he's going to make some mistakes on Friday. We have to understand that he's going to make some mistakes. But if he makes some mistakes in week 2, by the time we get to the state playoffs, he's not making those mistakes anymore. That's
Yep.
development. That's showing signs of growth. And the way you do that as a football player is to play games. Doing things in practice is one thing, whether it's high school or the NFL. You have to play games to experience that. You have to have mistakes versus live game competition and game speed. And for us, and what we do in terms of evaluation, we have to miss.
Yep.
You got to miss on some guys to understand why you missed on them, right? Why did I miss on this player? And was it something out of my control? Did he go to a situation that was poor?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the evaluation is because he went through a coaching change in his second season. He's been on 3 offensive coordinators already. Doesn't have the offensive line, doesn't have receivers, and he's put into a scheme that really doesn't utilize his traits. Well, then that's a situation we can't control. But you are going to miss. I missed plenty of times. Trust me.
Yeah, I know.
It happens. It happens.
It does. I think accepting that early on, or I wouldn't say early on. I would say probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I was like, yeah, this is just going to happen, and kind of deal with it and get on to the next stuff and learn from it was the best thing I could have done. But thank you so much for coming on. This was an incredible conversation, tons of information that I think everyone will get a lot out of. So just thank you so much for being here with me today and getting everyone this insight that not a lot of people do get. So that's it's very, very cool. And let everyone know what you're doing right now, what you're going to be working on, what they can look forward to seeing you do next.
Well, right now, I just published at ESPN my draft superlatives. Okay, so what I do is I take the draft's best, we call it, at 53 different skills and traits. So, for example, quarterback, I have the best accuracy, best pocket mobility, best arm strength, best field vision, best release, and they go down the line. And for defensive backs, I love doing it because I have some fun with it.
Yeah.
But the most urgent in coverage. Okay, maybe I made that trade up. That's okay. It's okay, but the trait matters. And that's a piece I really have fun doing every year. That's posted right now. And I have some pieces that have been posted throughout the spring. I break down the quarterbacks, what I think are their best traits, their player comparisons. Did some thing with the offensive skill players. And I also write fantasy at ESPN. So right now I have a piece coming out this week based on free agency moves I liked in terms of players, whether it was because someone was cut at their position, a trade that happened, or a player signed with a new football team where I think their fantasy projection will be. And we're going to do a lot of stuff for fantasy over draft weekend. It'll be live on ESPN.com, be instant analysis on what we think of players, how they fit, like we were just talking about before, situation, and in terms of depth chart and their opportunity this year. But we have a lot of new stuff coming out. It'll be fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I do fantasy stuff too, as well. So it's always nice to see the crossovers that we get to talk about. But again, thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you all enjoyed this. This was incredible. An hour and 20 minutes of just fantastic conversations. So you guys have yourselves a great day, and we'll see you next time.